Hey everyone, welcome back to the things we know. I am, I don't know about excited. I'm glad we're going to talk about this because this is something you and I text about all the time. We text about it with our friends. We talk about this with our kids. Remind me again, how is inclusion such a bad thing?
I don't know, but it sure has taken on the persona of the boogeyman these days, hasn't it? And I'm going to say boogeyman. I'm not even going to be gender inclusive in that. It's like the
Yes.
boogeyman.
Yeah, I mean, oh, and in case you're wondering, like we had a lot of fun working titles for this. Like, how did woke get broke? It's just
That's right. I
even like
forgot.
that as a title is so interesting. It's such a buzzword. Like buzzwords and backlash was another title. But really, what it came down to was me saying, I'm going down the rabbit hole on this, and we've been talking about this a lot. Let's just like, how did inclusion become a bad thing?
Yeah.
Because honestly, in my personal education and yours, in our own experiences in life before we even met each other, here's how I put it. Okay, I feel like I'm in a car on a road, and I've been driving in the direction of what I thought should happen as
Mm.
we all became more educated, more enlightened, more empathetic, more aware that the
Had
experiences,
experiences. Yep.
yes, have experiences, more aware that, just take this country for example, because I know every country is going through this. We are not unique in this. I always think we are, and then I find out everybody's struggling. And I went traveling as far as New Zealand to find out they have similar struggles. But
Hmm.
the more aware you become of, what it is to be American and what it was like to be the first Americans and have people come here and say it was theirs. The more and more we learn and are aware, is it's an opportunity to course correct and be more inclusive, right? And so I've always thought that as a nation, the more we educate ourselves, the more we learn, we're going in the direction of everybody having a seat at the table, of you know making some having some amnesty and some restitution, at least in language, at least
Mm.
in laws, and the way we treat people, and the way people have access, that we are going in the direction of inclusion so that everybody feels like they have the same access and the same rights and the same treatment. So that's what I've always thought. Like, we think of the shameful things in history that have happened in other countries and in ours, and we look at things like Holocaust, and I've always been like so critical. How could people stand by while that was happening, even if it didn't affect them? All of that, right? And we think we're raising kids in a world, and it's been a lot of stops and starts, but in a world that's getting more inclusive. I don't want to get into buzzwords yet, but yeah, politically more correct, or just like more correct in the way we're referring to things. And then I feel like we
Well,
just
and
spun
sorry,
out in a, oh,
there's an. I just was like, we're growing up in a world that is literally more diverse from a
mhm,
race perspective,
right.
right? So I mean, and we are in this world whether people like it or not. Go ahead.
Race and gender, be in terms
Sure,
of
sure.
like what
Yes,
people
yes.
rights and all that stuff. But so to just go with my little, my metaphor, and then I feel like we've been spinning out in donuts on this road trip, and we got completely 180, and we're like speeding right back in the other direction in a way that, like, going back further than I even came from.
A hundred percent.
And so
Yes.
like that's just really jarring for me, and I hesitated to even talk about this. We're two white women, like I hesitate, but how do we not, right? Like I don't want to not talk about it because it doesn't affect me, because it does. It affects everybody, whether you realize it or not. And to me, it made sense. It doesn't matter where you stand politically. Like, if you're a human, if you care, if you want to, if you like the idea of inclusion, because nobody likes to be left out, there's this basic premise of why can't we make seats for everyone at the table? And I think this comes down to like different things we've talked about already in a couple episodes already this season, which is fear and neglect of certain experiences, and as much as we can say things about facts or wokeism or anything like that, really truly we've got class issues that are fueling so much of this with the economy. But what it comes down to is either you think there's a finite amount of power and access and seats at the table, or like you and me, we think like the more you include people, the more everybody has a shared power and the more we heal as a human race, right? So what we want to talk about is like, when did these buzzwords and the idea of inclusion become so negative and create such vitriol that it like really drove people to a place where they just saw it as this like evil left coming for their way of life, right?
Yeah.
And then like, what are we losing in the process?
So much. I mean, we're losing a ton when we don't look for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start. I mean, again, we at one point had the title "Why is woke broke?" But let's talk about woke. Like, where did that phrase come from? It is rooted in African American activism. Stay woke was a call to remain aware of the social injustices and the systematic racism, the systematic inequalities. But then it evolved into quote unquote wokeism, which from when somebody's using that phrase, they're using it in this place of like, oh, it's a broad range of progressive social policies and identity politics. And so all of a sudden, this ability that what I think of when I think of being woke is again inclusion, equity, diversity, kindness, empathy for other human beings, no matter what they look like, what gender they are, what sexuality they are, what race they are. And I mean, and again, and we have, I don't think we're equipped to talk about this, but even race is a construct.
Mm-hmm.
Gender is a construct. Not going to go down that path today, but it's just yeah, it just got something that should be so lovely and enveloping has again become the boogeyman.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we started with DEI. That is not something that we heard a lot growing up, but it
Mm-mm.
became really mainstream in my working life in nonprofit, and then into the world that we were working in. Even the company we were working for, I think, had a long way to go. They didn't realize like how white their staff was, and then they through different changes really looked at how, where leadership was given, and they decided to bring in more of a DEI committee to course correct. The idea for DEI, which has become like a really bad word on in certain circles that feel like it's one of those liberal virtue signaling things. The
Hmm.
idea, though, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a way of saying let's give somebody who's not qualified a job because they look different, which is such a gross misunderstanding of it. It is actually saying let's have a diversity of opinions, of experiences. Let's improve our organization, our goals, our company by making sure there's a lot of voices at the table. Let's make sure that as an institution, we're welcoming and we're offering training opportunities and access. Let's include, people who haven't found it easy to work here, right? Or haven't found it easy to even be, a part of this community. That's a beautiful thing. It's great, and I think it's astounding to me that at this moment, this week, at this time of recording, that companies are making sure that their shareholders and their customers and their clients know that, oh, we're rolling that back. Like that was a negative thing. That did something negative. We're rolling that back. When my hugest frustration with this is we weren't even close. We have not gotten there. It was a process. And it reminds me so much like just compare it, the way the pendulum swings on so many things, because I'm about to be 56. I've never understood this, why when one extreme idea doesn't work, they go to the full other extreme. So like, for example, in Portland, we're famous for decriminalizing drugs, narcotics, And, that was seen as ridiculous, hippie, experimental, lawless, and all that stuff. And it is if you do nothing else to
Right.
support it. And guess what? Not enough else happened. So of course
Mm,
everybody's like, that didn't work. When
right.
really, like, there's a lot of research and thought and even some science behind it. What needs to happen though to take a bold step like that is you need to really increase the funding and the programs for addiction, for mental health, and a whole other host of things. And for a lot of reasons, and for a lot of voting backlash and a lot of fear and a lot of economic things, those things didn't happen. So of course now they just want to throw the whole thing out, want to just go right back to throwing people in jail for marijuana. And I'm not even going to get into like my feelings or thoughts about it because I actually don't. I don't want to speak on that because I don't have enough facts, but I just see this happening all the time. So if in some places DEI wasn't done correctly, it doesn't mean it can't be done correctly. It doesn't mean that we can't educate people and make sure everyone feels included. But for some reason, it made other people feel attacked and excluded. And I'm not going to say I know in every situation that didn't happen, but the idea that like it's already getting rolled back when we didn't even, it's just this huge frustration that's like we didn't even accomplish it to know that it didn't work.
I mean, I think that's what's fascinating to me is that, this really got a resurgence with the murder of George Floyd
Right.
in 2020, right? Now, it was May of 2020. We were, I didn't realize it at the time, but thank God we were 8, 10 months away from having a new president who would be more supportive of this, which I think is one, it quite frankly, is one of the reasons it stayed around as long as it did. But we're not talking very long. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, it quote unquote didn't work. How do you know? That's not enough time to have empirical evidence that it didn't work. And what is fascinating to me as you're sharing all of this, what keeps coming to mind is that again, it is diversity, equity, inclusion. There was the whole bullshit last fall around DEI stood for didn't earn it. Oh
Oh
my
geez, I didn't
God.
even I didn't even know
Oh,
that. I didn't.
yeah. Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. And again, that was all around the fucking lies that were being put out there around VP Harris and how you know, how she made it to be a attorney general and then a senator and then a vice president. She didn't earn a single one of those things. Okay, I'm not going down that path.
I
You know
mean,
where I'm going if you know.
she did go to law school. She did get
Right, but I
elected,
mean
but
the
you don't
irony, the
can't sleep with that many
irony
voters.
that the person who did all these things didn't earn her place in politics, but a TV fake millionaire did is just again hypocrisy on
Right.
a level. That being said, as you said, diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't about, oh, let's bring in more people of color, let's bring in more women. It is that, but it's about diversity of thought. And so
Mhm.
no one is being excluded because other people are being included. And yet there is this part of society, and I'm just going to own it as a white person. I'm not going to claim it for any other race, but like it did seem to be heavily dominated from white people worried that their life was going to be different because other voices got to be heard. And that's just not true. It's not fucking pie. It doesn't go away because I give it to somebody a piece of pie doesn't mean you don't get a piece of pie. It's so fucking annoying. And it actually makes things better because you get to hear you what are we missing in a situation where there isn't diversity of thought, where there isn't equity, where there isn't inclusion? What amazing, brilliant ideas could we maybe not be hearing because they come from a person that doesn't look like us or doesn't believe like us or doesn't have the same sexual orientation as us? Like it's insanity in its finest. And so it's just crazy to me that we're not even 5 years out and now it's all being rolled back. To what
Yeah.
end? To what fucking
It's,
end?
I mean, it's hard not to mention, the conservative Christian voting base
Mm,
too, because there seemed to be genuine fear of like people coming after their lifestyle, that
Yep.
that a trans person on Capitol Hill somehow needs to be, excluded and pointed out, is the right way to behave. Like that is the most unchristian thing I've ever heard. But that aside, I feel like it. Yeah, I mean, what you just said, I was thinking of. It's really easy for, and I know liberals get panned and criticized all the time for sounding like some, elite educated, like the cultural elite. It's really easy to assume that like uneducated people would think that way, but I've been in circles with educated people as you have, and
Oh
they
yeah.
will admit that they think it's wrong, but they're sad that their kids aren't gonna, like, their kids are gonna probably not be up for those jobs or those scholarships because they're white. I'm like, what?
I know.
Where did you get, like, where did, like, my husband is is a white male. He's a lovely human being, and a lot of female, even non-white females who work with him really celebrate how he works in women's healthcare. But like he himself will be like, the fact that I'm in leadership in women's healthcare is still indicative of
Yeah.
of the fact. It's just a great example of like he's not hurting for leadership opportunities, right? So
Right.
like there is no proof that people are getting overlooked. There might be situations where people got told, hey, you were my candidate, but they really wanted to give it to this, Asian female or something like that. Those things do happen too. That's true. People are trying to course correct, for their institution. Committees can't agree on that. I can't agree on that. And also, I'm not going to say in every situation because I don't know that those weren't the reasons given. But what I do really hope is that we can somehow someday agree. And I don't know how we get there because now it's getting rolled back, is that
Hmm.
we're educating and learning. And the more we know, the more we start to look back, like in how it was reflected in media, how roles are given. Like, yes, the George Floyd thing brought a lot of things to light. I don't know how we roll that back. How do we suddenly unknow, the all the cases, like when it comes to law enforcement. I don't know. I've never actually honestly thought that defunding is the right answer. I've always thought train
It's
them
also
better,
not real,
fund
but sure.
fund them more. Right, exactly. This idea that they think people want them defunded. In law enforcement, facts. Sorry. Facts are that, if you're a person of color, you're in much greater danger of being in greater danger of being shot in a law enforcement situation.
Yep.
In healthcare, there are facts and lots and lots of funding, to train, doctors and nurses in more racial awareness because women of color are often not believed, and end up otherwise they dead when they shouldn't have been because nobody believed the pain they were in or the symptoms they said they were having, and they didn't get care in time. There was a ton of actual fact. There was like I have a friend who's way more educated than I will ever be. Beautiful African American woman who couldn't rent an apartment for a while because every time she showed up after they told her it was available, they said it suddenly was rented. So do
Wow.
not tell me that racism doesn't exist for people and that they have the same access and the same amount of equity. I have a friend in Portland who can't drive east from here to visit her parents without worrying about stopping at a bathroom in Eastern Oregon or Idaho. So and because of things people have said to her, racism is alive and well, even though yes, race is a construct, gender is a construct, racism is alive and well, and
Oh,
we
no
see it
question.
all. So tell me that you lost something that justifies rolling that back. I don't think you ever lost it. I think you didn't like the language around it, maybe. And when I say you, I like, I don't know who I'm talking to, but I definitely feel like, it's weird that it's getting a backlash before it had any success.
No, I mean, I agree. And I think it, I don't, you're right. There are probably places where something has not gone right in the rollout of DEI. Nothing's ever perfect. Um, but I don't, this whole idea that, you know, illegal immigrants are coming in and taking our jobs and la la la. It doesn't make any sense, but like we did talk about in facts a couple of weeks ago, right? If you feel a way and that's what you're being told, well, it's DEI. Even like your example of perhaps a white man was told that an Asian American woman took his job, let's say. She's still qualified. It just
Exactly.
means that they were trying to even the scales. Equity. Equity, that's what that
Right.
means, right? We've got five white men. We've got an Asian American woman, an African American woman, a woman who is as qualified. We're going to bring her in because it's going to give diversity of thought, because it's going to give
To the whole.
diversity of experience, which is going to make the organization better.
Mhm.
But it was borne out in the election for sure. White men are feeling the pressure of this experience. And so, I think it gave opportunities to McDonald's, John Deere, Harley Davidson, Lowe's, Ford, Walmart, Coors, all these companies that have just like, and the blatantness of it, like coming out and being like, hey, we're getting rid of DEI. Like, you're proud of that? I just find that
Yeah.
insane. And so it gave them an opportunity to like, to performatively, quite frankly, um, say, we got you, white people.
I mean, this feels like part two to our thing about facts because, yeah, I mean, when you put it that way, and also they're examples of forced measures and mandatory training that felt intrusive and insulting and ineffective and caused discomfort rather than fostering understanding. If it was done badly and they felt attacked, whether or not I know, I don't know if that's true, but I gotta believe enough experiences like that happen that fuel believing the
Right,
idea that it was doing harm.
right.
And
But where are the facts that it
right,
was? Where
right.
is the empirical evidence that shows it did any harm? It has not even been 5 years.
You know what's so interesting is there's so much backlash to emotional, intelligence. There's so much backlash right now. Oh, were your feelings hurt? We don't care about your feelings. Let's get some shit done, right? But all of this is about their feelings getting hurt, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that's so interesting. Like they
I
don't
mean,
like
again,
this idea. Like
hypocrisy is
I
strong.
don't I don't want my schools teaching my kids that white people are bad, and it's like, well, they were. They're telling an experience of how this country came to be, which, guess what, colonialism all over the world went this way. Let's learn from it.
Right.
Let's like learn how to understand each other. Let's understand the trauma that's in generational in some people and how their people came to this country. We're not saying you're bad 8-year-old and you did this. We're saying let's understand how to grow up and go forward, like how to get into
Right.
an inclusive place. That's how I see it, right? I'm
Totally.
completely aware that's not how people see it, but it's insane to me that they want to ban books but not the guns that kill even their own kids. You know what I mean? Like their
I mean,
own,
lots
like
and lots of kids have been killed at trans drag queen book readings. I'd
not a
say,
fact. Not a fact.
spoiler alert, not a fact. Not a fact.
Lisa is being sarcastic. Um, yes,
I
yeah,
mean,
drag queens are such a danger.
it's
I
so,
mean,
so
the
dangerous.
the idea that we can make, like, I mean, obviously, yeah, let's get away from the critical race theory stuff that people
But
find
but
so
but
offensive
let's
and
not
like,
for a second though. Critical race theory is not like, again, it's not really a thing. It is teaching history. But someone decided to call it critical race theory, which sounds again so scary.
and
It's
it sounds
history.
divisive and it sounds
And it sounds,
unpatriotic.
oh my
But
God,
guess what? It's
it's not a
history.
thing. It's history. I mean, there
I
is
mean,
the famous phrase, people who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it.
I know. And if you look at like other countries, no one's doing it perfectly, but other countries that have had amnesty hearings and have acknowledged have acknowledged some of the wrongdoing that happened to, racial groups. They are not they're not in as much turmoil
Correct.
as we seem to be, fueling misunderstandings and being at such odds. It's so bizarre. And yeah, I'm not to like even get away from it. And I don't see it as divisive. I see it as critical and important. And it's just bizarre. And how like I grew up knowing how much we were criticizing the Soviet Union for all the propaganda it was teaching its children. What are we doing if we actually take out
That.
actual history?
Yep.
But then when I think of, and again, not to get away from it, but to move topics to, kids who don't identify as the gender they were born with, kids who don't speak English, kids who are disabled. Hello, like that's pretty important to me. Like, kids who like don't have the typical experience, right? How is I mean, I would like to do a whole episode on inclusion when it comes to people with disabilities because it's pretty important to me, and that's a whole topic I'd like to get into. But like, and then someone who's trans, how is making sure that people who just want to be included feel included? Like, how is it okay to exclude people just because it makes you uncomfortable?
And
And
literally has no effect on your life. That's the thing that kills me.
right,
Has no, in
i
those
i
instances.
I do not. There's somebody I follow who had she's really outspoken. I love her. I've probably shared her stuff with you. She's local here, and she had, she gets a lot of haters. And someone said it was on the subjects of abortion and trans people said, "What am I supposed to tell my 12-year-old when he's uncomfortable wondering why a man's wearing a skirt?" And what do I tell him about a woman who's had an abortion? She was like, "Well, I mean." She said when we raised him Christian, she said, "Well, pray for her and tell your son that's how that man feels comfortable." Like, I don't
And
know. What do
also,
you want?
none of that is in the fucking Bible.
Right.
None
And
of it's in the
also,
Bible.
exactly, not only that, but like, why is it our job to help you
Feel comfortable.
like not like feel more comfortable? Like, why
Hmm.
do you have to explain that? Why can't it just be that's how that person feels comfortable? How do you feel comfortable? Why does that
Yep.
have to be a conversation that like why do we owe the way you want to shield your child from somebody else's choice, a benign choice to be who they are? I don't understand that. Like, to me, what I really try to instill in my kids, and I believe, I believe that that's who they are too, in their own ways, in their own, ways about going about the world is, you know, if somebody's not doing harm, why can't they be safe? Why can't they be accepted? Why can't they love who they love, dress how they dress, be who they are? Like, how is that threatening me in any way?
It's not. And I think the thing that's again, I've said this will be my third time using this word, but the hypocrisy is incredible because their whole come from is, oh, gay people are indoctrinating, trans people are indoctrinating, critical race theory is indoctrinating. And yet, what you're telling me is if I don't believe like you, then I'm wrong. You're actually trying to, and we've had this conversation before. Me personally have gotten so many people coming at me on social media, mostly on Instagram, because I'm more public there, of trying to tell me you just don't know. You should read this. You should learn this. I'm like, bitch, I am almost 56 years old. I am an educated woman. I am an experienced woman. Don't tell me what you believe is how I'm supposed to believe. You do you. I'll do me. And none, I'm not affecting you and you're not affecting me. So it's just this hypocrisy around if you don't believe the way I believe, then you are wrong. And again, that goes against diversity of thought. Like let's
Yeah.
bring your arguments to the table in a way that is inviting conversation, inviting um, cooperation and collaboration, and let's see. And maybe we still walk away completely on two sides. That's fine. But this this judgmental aspect of all of this. And again, I think it's so fascinating that it is pushed back on us. I mean, it's classic gaslighting, right? We're the ones indoctrinating. We're the ones doing that. We're doing all the bad things, we being liberals. Dude, show me where that is true. How is being inclusive bad?
Yeah, we're not saying you can't be a
Be
gun-toting
be be
misogynist.
right. Be a misogynist. Be a racist. Be, you know, be anti-choice. God
Yeah.
bless. But
Yeah, you get
let
to do
me
that.
be me. You get to do that. You get to do that. That is on you. If you believe in heaven, God, goddess, or God, or whatever will meet you there and tell you what he or she thinks your life was
Yes.
like. It does not affect me. Leave me alone.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, I will say that it's very fair for people to say liberals are just as judgmental because we are, but we can be. And so that but the exclusiveness, it's like,
Yeah.
you and I are so rooted in the human experience of we cannot survive. Like we all long for love, safety, and belonging. And where is the love and the safety and the belonging in saying that didn't work, we're pulling that back, we don't have to we don't have to do that anymore, we don't have to make sure people are included. I would love to see the proof that people are really like didn't earn it, or like that are not qualified. I don't think I think there's so many levels to this, because even where people did get promoted, or maybe in a choice they were like, let's go with the person who's going to bring a new set of experiences and really diversify, whether it was race or gender or otherwise. In any one of these cases, even whether or not they were qualified, did they also do the institutional cultural shifts to
Mm.
like help that person be received? Because like I know in medical world, like they've had to overcome a lot where you know um and Brendan's told me about some of the best physicians he's ever met are Black females, but nurses were treating historically, especially when we live in the South, but not even just there, everywhere. Some nurses were treating them really badly and they weren't being
Hmm.
treated the same. So like institutionally, training has to happen in terms of interpersonal,
Yeah.
professional behavior. And not just around race, around gender too, and around different cultures, like different ways of doing things, understanding neurodiversity, right?
Yeah.
So like inclusiveness is so important, and to just like throw it out because it made people uncomfortable
Well, can I
just
ask
puts
you?
us back generations.
So I'm going to show my ignorance at this point. Is that the prevailing explanation as to why people are rolling this back? Is that the, I'm going to say, excuse
Yeah,
that they're
I
using, that it didn't work? Because it feels to me like they are kowtowing, as so many people are, to who is now in the White House. It doesn't
well,
feel to me like they are rolling this back because it didn't work, even if that's what they're saying. It feels like they know that this regime does not believe in DEI, and so they're going to, yes, sir, may I have another, and roll back the things that are actually helping the world.
I would say it's a complicated answer. I don't have the full factual answer on
I
that.
just didn't know if you had seen that, if that's like when the headlines, because I mean, I've heard these things, but as you know, we both talk about this. We're not that dialed into this
I
kind of news, so I'm just seeing headlines. And I just
I
didn't
would
know if that was the reason.
say, I would say again, when we go back to the idea of facts, there are some companies that will point to that being the reason that they didn't make a profit, and they have
Oh my
charts and things
God.
like that. So that, so I would say you try to
Who
peel
hasn't
that.
made a profit? I just, for a hot minute, McDonald's isn't making a profit. Do you know how expensive it is to eat at McDonald's these days?
I
Who in
don't.
that list? John Deere,
Probably
Harley
I do
Davidson,
not.
Lowe's, Ford, Walmart, Coors. I'm sorry, which one of those companies isn't making a profit?
Right. I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume that the pandemic hit every nation, every company, like everything in a big way for obvious reasons, but people are interpreting the reasons why, in ways that support their claims, but I have no idea. I can't back that up with any fact, but I keep seeing that. Like, there's not a single incumbent that got reelected anywhere in the world, if they
Oh,
came through
yeah.
the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And I see that in companies too. There's a lot of companies that I was just reading the business section of the New York Times the other day, and I was noticing that like that just if you were in leadership during that time, you're going to take the fall. So I don't know if DEI is going that way too, but I would say there isn't one reason that they're rolling it back. But yes, it has a lot to do with the fact that like we're in a wave, a resurgence of conservatism, and that doesn't fit.
And Christian conservatism in particular, which
Right.
again doesn't make any logical sense. I don't know. Last time I looked, Jesus was pretty
It was
inclusive,
pretty inclusive.
pretty inclusive, pretty equitable,
Yeah.
had a diverse
Um,
population around him.
so what I want to say is, in that vein, there is the backlash is claiming reverse discrimination and dividing people based on
Right.
identity, right? Um, I think that's how they're mobilizing certain bases and
Yeah, for sure.
using woke and DEI as a bad word. So when you start to associate it with something that like felt divisive, that feels like it goes against these good ideals, these patriotic ideas, then it's really easy again to just not look at the human side of it and say this
Yeah.
shit didn't work. This was a little too politically correct, a little too woke. This stuff is bullshit. And which brings us to misogyny, which is always part of this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, we've said this recently, and we'll say it again for the first time in something like 20 years. In the House of Representatives, there's not a single committee led by women. So we're going backwards. And it
Although,
folds into this.
if I
Yeah,
may, part of that could be tied to the fact that there are not a lot of Republican women in the House.
right. This is
So,
true.
I mean, I'm not forgiving it because that in and of itself is a problem, I suppose. But, one of the beautiful things about the Democratic Party is we are very diverse, equitable, and inclusive. We have a lot of people of color and women in our side of the House and Senate. And so it could literally be because of a dearth.
This is true. And while I don't want to get into a place where I sound like I'm bashing the party, I think we can both agree that they are needing to really look at really needing to look at like what keeps losing them elections, because it sucks. And yes, it's inclusive, and yet they're missing something really critical there. And I don't want to even speak to that because I've heard that from people I care about and respect and have voted for. So it's not like they're not aware of it. And I don't
Right.
even know that it's not even fair to say that wokeism lost this election, because we had a presidential candidate talking about having a gun. And like when we look at it, like they were speaking to the same immigration thing. So they weren't running on, we want, everybody to change their gender. They weren't. They weren't
Right.
running on that.
Although they
Everybody
would
keeps
ran some ads
saying
that way.
that
Yeah.
wokeism lost them this election. And it's not totally wrong that it has been part of things that have really made people feel excluded and divided. But I think it's an easy thing to point at when it's really hard to address class and economic issues. And so it's just
Yeah.
a really easy scapegoat. And I don't even know where to go in terms of the rest of this discussion, other than it definitely is strange to me that it's going away when you look at like the idea of being inclusive and how important that is, and the idea that we were growing and healing, and now we're like, nope, that was harmful, which is not true. I mean, not true to me. And then also, how do we address where the real division is, the division like between us and truth, between like class and economy and all this stuff? Like, how do we actually start telling the truth and stop believing all this bullshit that got in people's heads and made them feel like, oh, they have to vote this way because they're coming after me?
I know, and I think it is sad because if we keep talking to the same people, right? Like this isn't a joke because again, it's fact, but like, right now our Congress has a mean age of like a nursing home. So we are listening to really, really old school humans try to tell us how to move forward. And so what it feels like is not only are we legitimately moving backwards in what we're trying to accomplish, but if we are not opening up, are not opening ourselves up to hearing other voices. I'm not saying don't listen to white men or white women. I'm saying bring other people. We are saying this whole aspect of DEI is saying bring more people to the table. It doesn't mean you have to go away. It means we're bringing more people in. And how do we move forward as a world that is global? This isn't just about America. This isn't just about jingoism. Like this, how do we move forward in this global world, global society, if we aren't willing to listen to voices that are not cisgendered white males, straight white
Yeah,
males? And
I
so
like
it
that.
is. It's just, it's so, so sad to have it go from being something that is about repair. We're still gonna make mistakes. I keep saying America for being the greatest country in the world. Like we're young, we are a baby country. And so there's a lot of mistakes left to be made, but we are actively choosing to go backwards and remake some of the same ones that we've already made. And that is just mind blowing to me.
And it's also true that a lot of countries are going like they're
I
having a
know.
conservative that's
Yep.
not just ours. I mean, like
I know.
Canada, Great Britain, New Zealand, like it's just bizarre. I
Maybe
don't
it's just a
I feel
moment in
like
time.
I don't want to like just completely skip over this idea about wokeism being one of the reasons in the election that affected the election because it did.
Yep.
I'm just saying it's more
It's more
granular than that.
complicated.
Like the couple of articles that I was looking at around it, one was The Guardian, which I know is, going to be a lot more aligned with me politically. But I like this quote: "The backlash against wokeism served as a unifying force for Trump's base, galvanizing voters who felt their traditional values were under threat." This was so fascinating to me because there was like a real, admittedly, ignorantly, almost racist response that liberals had to like how could Hispanic, or
Yeah.
Latino voters, and like, it was such an ignorant way of looking at, first of all, assuming that all people of Latin descent voted the same, because there was
Right. A
so many
monolith.
different whales there, and there was very Catholic, very traditional males who in the polls were saying, I just kind of felt like there was going to be no place for my son
Right.
if like there was just this idea that like woke politics were going to just push all men out of anything, like anything worth doing or having any role in society. It's ignorant, yes, and I don't say that person who said that is ignorant. It's an ignorant belief that was
hmm
being fed to people, going back to facts, right? So I do think like people who this whole make America great again, people really believe it's about traditional values. And is a real, like at this point, a choice to not really look into what you mean by that when you say that.
Right.
Because like values for who and who's included is I think our point. Cultural issues translated into political outcomes on many levels, right? And they became rallying cries for a huge portion of the electorate. And so we have so much to learn and repair on both sides. Both parties do. I think based
hmm
on that, I just don't think the winning party ever feels like they need to learn from it.
Well, but see, well, that's true. But what's interesting is as you were talking about this earlier, I thought, remember after Mitt Romney lost, like they tried to it was put forward. I shouldn't say they tried to do because I don't think they did. It was put forward this idea that, holy crap, the Republican Party better take a step back and look at where this world is going and try to repair, to figure out how do they appeal to a wider base. And
Yeah.
lo and behold, it's make people scared.
Yes,
It's not
that's
about
true.
inclusiveness. It's about scare the shit out of them. And I
Let me
just
scare
feel
you if you like if you're afraid of your traditional values being, shaken up. Let me scare you if you're worried about safety. Let me scare you and make you think you need my protection.
the weird thing
Um,
is, what is traditional values? I mean, again, I'm sure we could go down a big long path on this, but like, I literally live in it, and you too, but me maybe a little bit more in that I have a boy and a girl, and I've been married a long time, and
yes.
my husband works out of the house, and I make his lunch every day. Like
Yeah.
on some level, there's like a lot of traditional stuff in my family, um, and so who's to say I'm not traditional? Why is that? Why that I just it drives me crazy. Like this owning
So
all
true.
these words that people are just like taking ownership of, like the flag, like everything. Like, how did this happen? How did we get here?
Yes. That's, I think I sent you a really like hilarious, sarcastic reel or something,
Sarcastic? What?
what? And it was like how people assume I show up to Thanksgiving walking in and someone's like, I just had 5 abortions. I
Right.
have all these illegals. And like, it was just like this crazy. And my Beth and I the other day were talking about how it's interesting that our kids, they grew up in Portland, like they've grown up around a lot of heteronormative couples who've been married like 25 plus years. And then we were like feeling kind of bummed about that. Like, why have we why are
Why
we
aren't we
so
divorced?
why are we so normative? I mean, sort of joking about it. Like, it's funny. I mean, that's a joke about Portland. It's like this pretentious bohemia. You can say you're liberal. It's not that progressive when you look at like the actual, breakdown of, well, what's the word? Just like
Demographics.
demographics. Thank you. I couldn't come up with the word. But I think it's just because I can admit that and make fun of myself for it doesn't mean that I don't have a desire for like learning and constant inclusion
Right.
and like awareness, right? Like I'm not saying I know everything at all. What I'm saying is like if we are constantly curious and inclusive and like we have an intention for that, that means we're going to have to be committed to being uncomfortable to really listen and understand and not take it personally. It's that whole conversation of, can we talk about race without you think I'm calling you a racist?
Right.
Can we talk about gender without you think I'm telling you I hate men? Can we
Right.
talk about like the diversity of including neuro spicy people, like, or disabled people without you think I'm calling you a bigot? Like that. I'm just so tired and I don't have time for
Yeah.
people to take things fucking personally. And so it's funny that they think like we're all about just our feelings. Like, I actually think your feelings are getting too hurt and you're not listening with any sort of just awareness. Like, it's
Right.
not you, but honestly, it's like it's not you personally, but the way you vote is actually doing harm to people. It's excluding people. It's
Yep.
taking away benefits and access and rights from my disabled son, or from people of color, or from women in this case, and their access to healthcare. Inclusion means everybody should like feel free to live in this country and to
Right.
live the way they live if they're not harming other people.
I
So
mean,
that to
that's
me
what
is,
makes this country the best country in the world. If well, again, right, that's what could make it. Let me put it that way. That's what could make this the best country in the world. This, bring me your poor, you're tired, you're hungry. Like, it doesn't say bring me your white people. Like, I don't know. I don't, you know,
I
it's
know, I
it's
mean,
funny
everybody's
because
an immigrant. That's so true. Everybody's an
everybody's an
immigrant.
immigrant unless you are a Native American. For the love of fucking God, how hard is that to figure out? I
The
don't
thing
know.
is, the thing we keep saying too is like, I've never ever once said or thought or felt like I want to do away with men. I just want like
I
there to
love
be
men.
inclusion at the table. I love men. I've raised men. I think they're out in the world not at all feeling like they've lost anything,
Not mine.
and they're very aware of their privilege, and they're very hardworking, and um, I don't know. I don't know why there's an assumption that like they should take less or say less. I think like it's just listen first. Listen
It,
first. Can we all just listen first?
it's interesting you just saying that, like, we've been putting this in the frame of sort of like this, all these DEI initiatives truly factually started after the murder of George Floyd. And it was an opportunity, or I think the way I looked at it at the time was it was a way for companies to respond to that horrible, horrible experience and say, okay, we got to do better, right? We got to do better. And I really, really, really appreciated that at the time. It felt really good to see companies that are typically pretty conservative in the way they support politicians. And so I was like, okay, this feels good. This feels good. But, this is, in some ways, this isn't new. I mean, I think back, years and years and years ago, Darren would apply for grants in writing or in his artistic uh, life. And he would say, I'm going to apply for this grant. And, chances are it's probably not going to go to me because I am a white man applying for this. And it's probably going to go to a woman who's as qualified. And he'd always end with, and I'm good with that. Didn't
Mm.
keep him from throwing his hat in the ring. He would keep throwing his hat in the ring, but he understood. And I'm literally talking 20 years ago. So this is not new news, right? Like I can remember it as clear as day. I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. There's a lot of great writers out there and a lot of great writers that are women or people of color. And chances are I probably won't get this, but I don't care. And again, that is the example of pie isn't necessarily taken away from you just because, keep throwing your hat in the ring, keep going for those promotions. If you don't get it because someone as qualified who isn't as represented at the corporation, great, celebrate
Great.
that. Celebrate that though.
No, I know. I just think that's funny.
I don't know.
I
It's funny. You
mean,
came in on this topic and you're like, I'm not really happy to celebrate. I don't think I quite realized how fired up I was about this.
it really is. It's the answer is not to do away with it. The answer
Right.
is to like keep having the conversation
Yeah.
because nobody who works hard and cares shouldn't be considered.
Correct.
Like nobody who works hard for it and sets out to do it. What we're trying to do is create, and yes, along the way certain corrections don't get handled well and people
Yep.
feel really overlooked and it fuels, but the proof that you never lost power is that you took it away.
Right.
So
Hmm.
please remember that. Like there's this behavior that I keep seeing celebrated that implies they got it back. And I feel like, when did you ever lose it? When
Yep.
did you ever
We
not
still have
have
never had
it?
a woman president.
Right.
So what power have men lost?
I know. So yeah. It's this is a very long ongoing conversation and we didn't even talk about as much as I thought as we would talk about it, like how it's reflected in art and media and like how, the long, like how far it's come and then yet how far it hasn't come. Like
Yeah.
Lost, for example, was a show I was really into, and one of the things that was celebrated about Lost early on, and I have to admit I can't remember this being something I was even thinking, but apparently early on everybody was like, what's so great about this show besides the great writing is the diversity in characters. And there was an Iraqi soldier and a Korean couple and several African American characters, only to find out, well, first of all, you didn't even have to find out if you watched it. I remember at one point going, gosh, if you're a Black character on the show, you're not living long, like that's strange. And
Mm,
but if but to find out behind the scenes, and the other thing that was obvious is it really, after all of that celebrated diversity, it really came down to like 4 white characters.
mm.
Um, but and the one female, she had this really strong character role, and they ended up just writing her into a love triangle, and that was hugely disappointed for the actor and for the people who were watching. Like
Yeah.
really, but what was happening behind the scenes in that writer's room, which has been fully documented, totally admitted by the perpetrators too. I have to give them a little tiny bit of props for saying, yep, we own that. We did create that toxic environment. We were so focused on other stuff and we did not stop that. So I will say, like, it doesn't seem to be a lot of dispute about this part, but that writer's room was so toxic for women and people of color. It did a lot of damage. And, it has gone on to make a ton of money in syndication and be celebrated as like a really, important move in television to become almost like filmmaker quality, right? JJ Abrams was the director. He wasn't the one implicated. It was the creators, the show creators and the showrunners. But there's so much examples of that right now. Like we're hearing about it all the time right now, and like how women are still being treated on set, how characters are still not quite always going to get the main roles. They're going to be sidekicks, and then that's how they bring in diversity or something. So there's still such a long way to go there, and Hollywood gets made fun of by in politics right now for trying to represent something different. So it's really interesting. I think it perpetuates it, and then sometimes it tries to make a statement about it, and either way it ends up looking bad. And I think that's fascinating to watch.
I mean, yeah, entertainment. Yeah, we've focused a little bit here on business and politics, obviously. But yeah, the reality of it is every specter of society, every sector, I guess I should say, of society is bumping up against this for sure. And I we always talk about ending sort of with hope. I mean, I hope that, well, first off, that was the list that I read was the list I looked up. There was a few other companies that I don't think are big. They're not surprises in my mind that they rolled back DEI, a couple of these other companies, and they're not well known in my mind. But um, there's a lot of companies that aren't doing that. Target's not doing it. I'm trying to think of some that are bumping up against it, some of the opposites of these companies. But there are companies out there that are doubling down on DEI. So while this is a frightening time and a frightening rollback for some companies and some aspects of society, I don't know that they've quote unquote won because if you are a certain human being, you're not going to allow that to be true. You and I are not going to be like, oh, I guess it didn't work. Walmart doesn't like it, so I'm not going to do it anymore either. And so there is still hope here that if you continue to speak out and focus on what you can do to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive in your own life, in your own if you have a small company, whatever it might be. I mean, you and I try to the best of our ability to bring in other voices, not men
Mm.
voices, unless it's our sons, but we're not just talking to white women all the time. And we're really aware of that. And I'm not trying to pat us on the back.
Mm.
It's just, it's a value of ours. And so there's
And
still plenty of people out there trying to do that.
And the only reason we're not bringing in men's voices is because this pod is for women of all
Right,
ages.
right, right.
And we have brought in your husband though, and he's great. I also just want to say, and I do like the idea of some time bringing back some people I have in mind to talk about specifically about why inclusion matters for the
Yeah,
disability community. But like my son Griffin wears a bracelet. It's actually Griffin and Miles because they both have worked for an organization that provides bike training and skills for kids with disabilities. And like inclusion matters
yeah.
is the slogan on their bracelet. Griffin wears it all the time. And when I think about the values behind that idea, it isn't just, I mean, it should just be enough to make sure like every human being feels included and it feels like they have something to contribute and feels like they have value. I think no matter who you are, no matter what you believe, like if you can argue with that, I'm not sure you're like, in the right place like with yourself. But
Yeah.
who can argue that like human beings deserve to feel like they're included, like they matter. It isn't just about tolerance and empathy. It isn't about just being kind. And it isn't just about, but gosh, it could be like just making sure everybody has connection with someone else. what it actually does is just as much for the includers. It really does create
Mm-hmm.
this beautiful synergy and intersection of educating everybody included. Like my family, the schools that Griffin's been part of, the organizations that have hired him and been part of, we will all say we're better because he's part of it, right? Like we get so much more than almost he does from that,
Mm.
from like learning how to communicate. And it reminds me of the school that my kids went to. It's like all kinds of minds, right? Like it's worth coming at a math problem or some sort of lesson from all different directions so that each person feels some mastery or some ease with it, so that everybody experiences everybody doing something well, not just like the usual suspects doing things well, right? And so I think it benefits everybody. Everybody become like, it's an elevated community that includes kids and doesn't, like, in a school, for example, it doesn't relegate them to some classroom where someone just parades them out for assemblies, but like
Yeah.
actually helps people slow down, communicate, include, think of new ways of going about it so that everybody's contributing. But also, like, it's teaching leadership, it's teaching a broader way of problem solving. So, and that has such a social impact, and I do believe brings profitability if you think of it in a business terms.
Yep.
Anyone that like, it's not just going to increase your profit with your conscientious customers who are glad you're including people. Like, it really is going to bring about a much more diversified product when you can bring in that many different schools of thought. So
Well,
I
and
know
I
that's a
just
long long way of plugging it, but honestly, it is better for everybody. It's not just better for the person you're including, and you don't pat yourself on the back. It literally is going to improve your experience.
this time last year, I was in Portland and we did a lot of fucking fun things when I was in
Yeah.
Portland. A lot. My favorite thing was going to Griffin's basketball game.
Oh, I know. It's so
And
good.
that there was I want you to explain quickly before I reflect on it.
Mm.
Explain the team he was
Yeah,
on, the group he was in.
Special Olympics, which most people listening would be familiar with. They at a school level, they offer unified sports, and unified sports are for abled and disabled kids. That's just not the best way to put it, but that's probably the quickest way to put it, right? So kids of all abilities can participate in competitive sports together. And Griffin, that was the last year age-wise he could be part of that team. And
Wasn't that his last game I even got to see?
it was, yes, it was. And that was really sweet because it was also like a senior night, so they did a little gauntlet and he ran
Yeah,
through.
I
And
mean, it was just, you and I talk about joy all the time. What an absolutely incredible, joy-filled experience. And you and I sat obviously sort of over on the parent side, but I was so we had the full visual, not only of the gauntlet, which was, I love a good gauntlet, but of the seniors that were there, cheering on. They'd made signs, and there wasn't a single moment where I thought any of these kids felt like they had to be there. They were so happy, and it was no different than going to a basketball game at in the High School Musical. Like, it was
I know.
just a genuine sense, and nobody suffered because kids of other abilities were on that basketball court. Nobody suffered. It was so joyful. And to think that that kind of stuff could be looked at poorly is nauseating.
I know. Well, yes, not only it's actually better than one of those other high school games because all sides are cheering for all people.
Yes.
Like it really is, like, no
Yes.
matter who makes the basket, everyone is
I
cheering it on their
know.
feet. And it is, and my friends like you, like they would come to it and I'd say, thanks for coming. Like, are you kidding? This is like the best thing I could have done for
Oh my
myself.
God. It was
It
so
really
good.
is just, it is so life-giving
Yes.
to experience that kind of joy and that kind of inclusion. It makes everybody feel good.
And I think there's the bottom line. If you're listening to this and you're hard rolling your eyes and you just think we are on a high horse, It's a high horse I am more than willing to die on. I know that's not the phrase, but secondly, I don't know, take an opportunity to go out and experience some diversity, some inclusion, and tell me that you don't walk away more human, more fulfilled, more joyful. Would you like to share the song?
Oh my gosh, I almost forgot. Thank you for that. Okay, so the song we came down to was Rise Up by, is it
Mm.
Andra or Andra? Andra
Uh,
Day?
Audra Day, I thought.
Andra Day. It's okay. That's a beautiful song. I can't believe we haven't used it yet.
I know.
So the lyrics at the very beginning, I could just say the whole song, but I'll go from the lyrics into the beginning of the chorus, which is you're broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find the fighter, but I see it in you, so we're gonna walk it out. We're gonna walk it out and move mountains. And I'll rise up. I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up. I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up and I'll do it 1,000 times again.
Mm. And so will we. This probably won't be the end of this conversation. I also can't believe we haven't, in 3 seasons or two and a tenth, had talked more about bringing in inclusion around neurodiversity. I know we hope to have an episode about ADHD, but did you have
We
a
did
thought?
cover, no, we did cover neurodiversity at
I
some
know, but I
point,
mean, to bring
but
some
not
other
inclusion.
voices in is
Yeah.
what I meant. I think that
Yeah.
that's my takeaway, is that that's something we gotta get scheduled, because that's another piece of this. And,
I
you
have the
know,
perfect person. I
oh,
can't wait.
I'm certain you,
Yes.
I mean, you would be the perfect person, but yeah, it'd be nice to have some additional people that you are familiar with. And, um, this is season 3 of The Things We Know, and this is where we're at, and this is where we're going to keep moving forward, because these are the things that are really important to keep this world moving and just becoming better. And we're going to be fighting an uphill battle a little bit with that, but I'm here for it.
Me too.
Yay. You want to end?
Sure. I was just thinking, I was just kind of riding out the wave on your words. It was giving me a little hope. So, yay, here's
Mm,
to hope.
cheers.
Yeah, I would say what I would love to say is I welcome your responses. If you feel at all called out by this, that was so not our intention.
Yes,
That's the whole point here, is no one's like, it's a calling in. It's calling into each of
totally.
us. Like Lisa and I have had to do our own kind of conversations with ourselves over the years of, oh, the things I didn't even realize, the things I wasn't aware of. I mean,
The mistakes we've
absolutely.
made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with love, we're including you. So,
Yes.
feel included in this conversation and let us know your thoughts. And we'll be back next week with something else that really matters to us and hopefully matters to you. So until then, thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.